Serious, were you ever close to being killed, raped, kidnapped, robbed? If so, how did you avoid it, get away? I was a junior in high school and a guy brought a gun to school to kill me. He was arrested before I even got to school, I think. The rest of my high school was honestly kind of a blur. I'm sure this will get buried, but ask away if anybody has any questions. I have at most been mugged twice, and both times it was a similar approach by the mugger. The first one was a boy around my age, who came to me asking me if I had picked on this girl that I happened to know, and telling me to come with him so that his friend could confirm whether I was the guy they were looking for. I refused and he kept insisting, so I told him that he could just take a picture with his phone and show it to his friend to confirm. He kept insisting, but my dance class started and I entered the room, so he gave up. Another time I was going back home, and it wasn't even dark. This guy comes to me and asks me if I had picked on his brother. Immediately smelling bulls, I asked him what his brother's name was, but he refused to tell. He then took me to a corner and backed me against the wall and kept telling me not to pick on his brother and asking me to come with him to apologize to his brother. Luckily for me, this other guy happened to be passing through and he asked if something was wrong. He then asked me if I knew the other guy, to which I said no. He then stayed there telling him to let me go or he would call for help. The guy let me go and warned me not to pick on his supposed brother again. The guy who saved me followed me for a minute or two to make sure I would be okay. I can't thank him enough for saving me from an experience that could have been very traumatic. I was probably 8 when this happened. Bit me, my mum and brothers, they were around 6 and 4, were on a bus heading back home from shopping. Our stop came, so my mum told us to get off. We got off first, and as she was heading to get off, the bus driver decided to close the door and drove off. So there we were, 3 little kids all alone at our bus stop. I remember holding my brother's hands tightly and deciding to wait there, knowing our mother would get off the next stop and come get us. As we were waiting, within less than a minute, a man comes up to us and after standing with us for a few seconds, tells us to follow him to his house where he would then call the police. Now luckily I was a very mature child for my age and knew my rights from wrong. I said that we shouldn't, whilst still holding on to my brother's hands, and he insisted. As we reluctantly were walking behind him, my mother appeared. She ran all the way, bless her, and said the bus driver wouldn't stop when she demanded that he stopped and opened the door. At this point, the man just told my mum how he lives just down the road and was about to call the police there. She didn't think that his intentions could have been bad at the time and just thanked him for trying to help. I can't imagine what could have happened if my mum didn't make it in time and if I had agreed to go the first time he suggested it. I believe the guy's intention was bad, because why wouldn't you wait with the kids for a little while and call the police there and then? Why would you try to lure random small children to your house? Scary. Agreed. That definitely sounds like a lie he made to lure children. You are probably incredibly lucky that your mom came. The apartment I lived in when I was little had a chain fence separating the parking lot of apartment complex on the other. When I was 6 or 7, there was a guy who I realized later on was a child predator spent a good amount of time trying to talking me into going to the other side to play with his dog. But it backfired on him, because at that point I was afraid of dogs. In Karachi, as an engineer working on a defense contract, and the president's plane crashed, Stinger missile will frick up a C-130. Instant armed actions. Heavy fighting between my hotel and the airport. Frick. Grabbed a box of granola bars, 6 bottles of water, a pillow, and a blanket, and a nice new Tom Clancy book, and hid in the nice cast iron bathtub for 2 days, while bullets blew through the windows and pockmarked the walls. I would get out and use the toilet during lulls in the fighting, and then it was over, and everything stabilized, and I got a new hotel room. Bulletproof bathtubs, baby. I snuck out at 3 AM and went to get something to eat with a couple friends. While coming back, we went down a street where some guys were fricked up on IDK what. They shouted crap like, "Why you on our street and you'll think you're hard?" One of them came and tried to fight my friend, but as soon as that happened the rest came and reaching for a gun, since later they started shooting at us while running. We hid in a little back alley where bushes allowed us to hide there for a while. We waited an hour and I guess they gave up. We ran all the way back to our own homes and since then never snuck out again. When I was 16, I was nearly kidnapped and God knows what else. I was waiting at a bus stop after band practice, maybe 9 PM, and some car drives up to the gas station behind me, hangs out, doesn't get gas or snacks, waits 5 minutes and leaves. He drives down the street where he still has visibility of me, and I him. Stays there for 5 minutes and drives back to do the same thing twice. Except the third time he drives back to the station he pulls up in front of me. At this point, I'm steaming mad. I've always been attractive, so I'm always in my guard in public because creeps. But this guy was clearly crossing a line. I storm over to the gas station, which had closed, and bang on the door. The clerk comes over and I tell him what's going on. We call my mom. She scoops me up, and we take a million pictures of him and his car, and follow him around a few miles to scare him straight. If I had been paying less attention, or was more naive, I have no idea what would have happened, and I'm happy with that fact. An ex started to become abusive towards me. One day I had enough and ended the relationship. I went to leave and he blocked my way, and he said if I tried to get past him, he'd kill me. I stepped around him. He reached out and grabbed my throat, slammed me backwards onto the floor, and fell to his knees next to me, strangling me. Right before I passed out I had a burst of energy, got an arm free, and he let up on his grip enough for me to get some air blood flow and started flailing around as hard as I could. I managed to slam him in the head with the side of my fist. My thumb knuckle nailed him right in the temple. It stunned him and he released his grip on my throat. I shoved him onto his side, jumped up and snatched up my bag, ran out of his house, got to my car, and left. I was sent as a 16-year-old female a few blocks away to collect my younger sister from a friend's house. On the way back we stopped at a little store for snacks, popped in our headphones, got stuck into our respective playlists and carried on home. I kept the volume on low just in case, and thank all the gods. Next thing I hear are a group of boys of mixed ages, but on average, my age, following us and trying to get my sister's attention. I must have been chopped liver. I instruct her to ignore them and keep walking. We put our respective music players away. They persist, for a good few minutes, even sending their football, soccer ball, in our direction. I interceded, positioning her in front of me, so I was in between her and them. They begin raining blows down on me and trying to move me aside. But as you all know, nobody gets between anyone and their baby sister, even the tiny, terrified shrimp of a teenager I was then. We continue walking and I direct my sister to change course and head for the main road, where someone was bound to see us and put a stop to it, I hoped. Lo and behold, the route was dead. So I did the only other thing I could think to do. I pulled out my mobile phone, cell phone, and showed them that I'd dialed 999 and if they didn't frick right off, I'd call it. Clearly they didn't think I was serious, so I called it. Sure enough, that was the only thing that would convince them to clear off. Nonetheless, we retreated to a nearby pizza place we frequented on occasion with our older brother, who was at work, to wait for the police. They took statements and descriptions from us and drove us home. My mother was initially concerned about the embarrassment of having a police car drop us off at home, but my dad stood right by my decision. As a former paramedic, she came around. I dread to think what those guys had planned, but ain't no way they were doing anything to my baby sister. This is far from the only time I've had to step up and take punishment to protect her, and I regret nothing. Even now I raise my son to view authority figures as allies, not enemies. I know he'd not hesitate to approach a police officer in the same scenario. Not my story, but something that happened to my aunt and cousins. They were in a Walmart parking lot and my cousins got in the running car while my aunt went to put the cart away. When she walked back she saw a sketchy dude walking around and looking in the car, so she booked it back to the car. Right before it looked like he was going towards the driver's door, she got in, locked it, and drove away as fast as she could. My parents and I were in Spain in March of this year, and we rented a car to drive from Barcelona to Valencia. I was driving, and we were near Tarragona. About halfway, it was mid-afternoon, and there wasn't a lot of traffic on the turnpike. A car came up beside us, frantically honking the horn and gesturing for us to pull over. I was worried that there was a problem with the car, which had been driving just fine. so I pulled to the side. The other car stopped about 100 feet ahead of us on the shoulder. I locked my door, but rolled the window down about an inch. Something felt hinky. The passenger exited the car, and so did my mom, who had been in the passenger seat. He didn't speak any English, or at least pretended not to, and we spoke very limited Spanish. He kept repeating problema, problema, and pointing to the rear passenger side wheel. He kept looking at me like he wanted me to get out of the car and go around and take a look. I refused, and I told him, in English, that whatever the problem was, he could show my mom that he didn't need me. My mom didn't see anything wrong with the wheel, and after a few minutes of not being able to communicate properly, she pulled out her phone to try a translator app. Just then, the driver of the other car honked at his friend, and his friend gave up and ran back to the car. They drove off. We pulled off at the next exit, and I crawled under the car to check more closely. Nothing was wrong with the tire or wheel. It didn't occur to me until a little bit later that they probably had intended to rob us or carjack us, and that's why they wanted me out of the car. I'm just glad that my hackles were up and I insisted on staying put. With the door locked, it never occurred to me to be worried about my mom, but we handled it like champs. When I was in college, a girl came into my room when I was passed out drunk and tried to have sex with me. The only reason she stopped and left was because she got frustrated that I couldn't get hard while she gave me a BJ because I was so drunk. Whiskey dong saves the day for once, fricking pose girl. Also, when I was about 6, I was at vacation on a camping Spain. The toilet building was pretty close to our caravan, so I always went by myself. So I just went to the toilet there, door locked. Then someone knocks. I say occupied. He tells me that he lost his wallet and that this was the toilet stall he was just on. Boys and girls were separated, but I didn't thought of that. I look around. It was a pretty small stall, so if it was there, I would have seen it. I don't see anything, so I tell him that it's not there. He then tells me he hid it so nobody would steal it. He asked me to open the door so he could look. I said that he could do that after I was finished, but he insisted that I should open the door. So I did. He came in and said something along the lines of, "I'm a child doctor. Can I maybe look in the toilets to see if you're healthy?" Yes, he was a sicko. I was flabbergasted and didn't know how to react. I just nodded at him while not saying anything. After looking in the toilet, he asked me if it was okay if he looked at my private parts to make sure I was healthy. Yes, this should have been an alarming question, but I was 6 and kinda in shock. I just nodded again while not saying anything. He looked with his eyes and his hands. I then knew something was wrong. I waited for the minute he stepped back so I could run past him and escape. He stepped back and I ran. I ran as hard as I could, not looking behind. I jumped on my little bicycle and cycled to the caravan. I walked past my parents and immediately went straight to bed. Even though it was midday, my parents noticed that something was off and went to me. They asked me if something happened. I explained them about the man and everything he said and did. After that, I don't remember much. It all went very quickly. Before I knew it, I was at the toilet building with about 10 cops joining me. They asked for a description and I gave them a pretty accurate one, but nevertheless, he was never found. He scarred me for life. I've been treated for my trauma, but it will never fully heal. Sometimes it scares me to think what would have happened if I didn't run away from him when I had a chance. When I was about 12, I'm female. My family and I were traveling to Paris by train from Germany for vacation. At the train station in Germany, my parents went to get some pastries and coffee for breakfast. They took my younger sister and left my older brother, 20, and I with the suitcases. My brother had to use the bathroom, so he left me alone with the suitcases. Almost as soon as he left, this sketchy looking guy came up to me and started speaking German. I told him I only spoke English, and he replied back that he spoke English too. He started making small talk with me, but then it turned into personal questions. Finally, he asked if I wanted to go with him. I kept looking around for my parents, and finally, my brother was walking back from the bathroom. I mentioned that my brother was coming back and the guy took off. At the time, I thought it was just strange, but as I got older I realized this dude was probably involved in human trafficking. My roommate and her boyfriend had his friend over one night. They were all drinking. I hung out with them for a little and then decided to go to sleep. About 30 minutes later I hear someone coming up the stairs and my bedroom door open. It was the boyfriend's friend. He proceeded to take my blankets off and climb on top of me. He held my arms down. I was stunned and scared, and when it finally registered what he was doing, I managed to break free and roll out from under him. I ran downstairs to my friend and her boyfriend, who laughed at me when I told them what happened. A few minutes later the guy came downstairs with a creepy smile on his face. I went back up to my room and locked the door and definitely heard him trying to get in later on. Please tell me you no longer associate with either of those fuckwords and that you called the cops. Driving across Texas on a warm spring day, I pulled off a country highway and pulled in under a covered bridge to let my dog cool off with a quick dip in a small river. As we were walking back to the truck, a police car came rolling slowly down the same cutoff we had taken, and when it stopped it was blocking my exit route. I was an attractive 35-year-old woman. The highway patrolman was late 50s, slightly overweight, classic old Texas. He kind of hitched up his pants and rocked slightly back on his heels and gave me a long look, from top to bottom and back up. As soon as I met his gaze I went cold. He asked me what I was doing there and why I was out here alone. My border collie stepped in front of me and I saw that the hair on his ruff was standing straight up on the back of his neck. Even though every cell in my body sensed that the patrolman had bad intentions, I responded nonchalantly and politely, but my dog kept staring him down. The guy looked at my dog and then back at me a couple of times, and I watched him think it over and decide to let me go. His whole body language changed and he told me that I should be more careful traveling alone. He backed his car out, drove off in the opposite direction, and I got out of there. Years later, I had a colleague whose sister was killed by a California highway patrol officer under similar circumstances. My dog made the difference. I used to deliver pizza, and I had been robbed a couple times. My favorite was actually the final time I was robbed. I quit the job a couple months later when I stepped into my career. Courier work. Ironically, it was the last run of the night. I had been on shift for over 8 hours, and I'm all but done in. I was so tired. I also never took more change than was absolutely necessary for a given run, and the price for the pizza was a little over $16, so I had $2 and change. As I'm walking up to the house to make the delivery, a guy steps out of a darkened area, pulls out a gun, and shouts at me to give him my money. Remember, I am dead on my feet, tired, and I was literally clocking out after I got back from the run. So I looked bleary-eyed at the guy and asked him if he thought $2 was worth the armed robbery charge I was going to call in. He gave me a long look, and then was offended I only had $2 on me. He cursed me out and ran for it. Fast forward about 4 years later when I'm delivering mail in the same neighborhood. I stop at a house nearby the one I was almost robbed at, and who would it be to answer the door for a certified letter but the guy who tried to rob me, with a few extra pounds and a different hairstyle. He asked if we had met before and I told him the story. That was a fun day. I was on my way home from school when I was 11 years old, and some guy in a truck with a construction company printed on the side pulls up next to me and claims he's a cop and tells me and a friend I was with to get in the truck. No frickin' way am I getting in this truck. I challenged him right away and asked where is his police badge. He says he doesn't need one. He's a special undercover cop. My friend stepped forward like he was going to comply, but I stopped him. I'm thinking if this guy gets out of his truck and chases after us, all we have to do is run for these strange back trails that went between houses in our neighborhood. Very complicated. They went everywhere. Once in there's no way this clown is going to catch us. I said we're not going anywhere with you. Then the guy got this strange scared look on his face, like he wasn't used to someone challenging him. Then he says he'll let us go and not to tell anyone he was there because he's some special undercover agent. I'm thinking bulls. I ran home and told my parents first thing. My dad called the cops. I gave them a full description of what I saw and what happened. They also questioned my friend. After that I have no idea what happened because we never got a follow-up from the police. Never saw that guy again. I'm not sure how close this is to almost being robbed, but about 15 years ago I lived in a Houston apartment. I had gotten a dog, my amazing dog Decker. R.I.P. The previous year, one night around 2:30 in the morning he started growling at the foot of my bed. I told him to quiet down, but then in a flash he jumped up and started running out of the room barking like crazy. I heard my garage door slam. I jumped out of bed, grabbing a bat. When I opened the door that led to the garage, my main garage door was wide open. A couple of nights later there was a robbery. The people committing the crimes were too stupid to change areas or MO, and got caught. It turned out that what they were doing was using a device that would scan through codes to open people's garage doors. Once they did that, people would often leave their interior door to the garage unlocked, giving them obscured and quiet access to the house. I was one of those people. While I can't prove it, I am almost 100% sure that Decker prevented a robbery and perhaps worse that night. When I was a teen I went to a party with some friends. Lord, typing this it does sound rather cliche, but anyway, I had one drink and next thing I knew I was wasted, and all I remember was trying to stand and falling hard on my knee. Had a huge bruise for weeks. Turns out my friend's older brothers spotted this older guy leading me up the drive to the road and they stopped him and beat the crap out of him. I'm not one to ever advocate violence, but frick, they saved my life. It's so creepy to think what a close call that was. Was walking to work in a quite populated spot in London and heard shouting from behind me. I ignored it, best option always, until I realized that it was directed at me. I took out my earphones and turned around and this fella starts rushing up to me saying something about me calling him a C or whatever, and that he'd end me bruv. Immediately I told him I didn't say anything and I'm on the way to work, leave me alone. He kept going and I noticed him pull a knife out of his inside pocket. I was like, oh for frick's sake, now? Right before work as well, haha. So I prepared for the worst, waiting for him to make a move so I could get him, but first I tried diffusing the situation and I basically told him to frick off, I'm on the way to work, you're making me late to something important. I didn't say any crap to you, leave me the frick alone. And you know what, he left me alone. Shouted threats at me again as I walked away, but still frick that guy. Killed? Yes. Robbed? Yes. All others? No. I basically was lucky. That's it. Long version. I was in the car with my family, parents and lil bro. We were leaving a friend's house, who lives in a street without exit, another translation sorry. When we get to the corner a car blocks our way and from the back door a young man gets down and put a gun. My father instantly puts reverse and does a 180-degree turn between a car and a container. None of us have any idea on how he pulled that out, and proceeded to speed to the wall on the end of the street. Meanwhile, the assailant opened fire 3 times, hitting the car with all 3 shots. Luckily, no one got hurt, and they left, probably not knowing we were pretty much trapped in that street. When I was about 4 or 5, I was with my mom out shopping during the day, and when we were walking out to the car, my mom noticed a guy following us. My mom opened the back door and threw me in. The guy shoved her and snatched her purse, ran to a getaway car and sped off. About 15 years ago, I woke up to my dad grabbing my baseball bat I kept by my bedroom door and saying, we're being robbed. Put your shoes on. Apparently this guy was going around the neighborhood trash cans and collecting aluminum cans in a trash barrel, so he could return later and take them at one time. My sister was leaving in the morning and saw a creepy dude on the side of our house. Trash cans are kept on the side or behind the houses in that neighborhood, and called my dad, freaked out as she done away. By the time my dad and I were ready to rumble, the guy's gone, but our neighbors were putting the kids in the car for school, so we asked if they saw anything. One of the kids screams. They hears hiding in a bush behind the neighbor's gate. He tried to casually just walk by us all. My dad has that bat at both ends stopping him and then shoves my dad on the ground. And my adrenaline kicked in after I saw that. The guy started power walking down the street and I chased him, and when I was close enough he turned and punched me in the face, and kept walking. I knew he punched me, but I only heard it. We got about 100 yards down the street. I saw him pull his backpack off one should, like he was gonna get something out of it. I tripped him from behind and grabbed his wrist, and as we fell I pushed his wrist to the back of his neck and he screamed. My knee was holding down the leg I kicked. Tall dude wiggled free and ran. I ran out of my shoes and stepped on something sharp, so he got away. He left his bag, and inside was Bowie knife. Turns out there were barrels stashed all through the neighborhood. Police came. Nothing happened. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.